I am a voice mimic, capable of imitating anyone's voice, and I charge $15 an hour. I've had clients come to me after a bad breakup, paying me to imitate their ex's voice to apologize and beg for another chance. Others have hired me to mimic their boss's voice just to pretend they were getting praised. Naturally, some people view my profession through a tainted lens, and that includes my own mother. She claims that making money off my voice is basically selling myself, and an utter disgrace. Just as I was gearing up to explain myself to her yet again, a new order came in. Blair, can you imitate the voice of a dead person? Absolutely. As long as you let me hear it once. I can mimic anyone's voice. That single order ended up changing the entire course of my life. Ever since I was little, I had a knack for mimicking all sorts of sounds, teachers, cartoon characters, anyone I crossed paths with. As I grew older, the skill only sharpened, whether it was a man, woman, child, or elder. I could effortlessly replicate their voice after hearing it just once. After getting laid off from my company last month, I started taking commissions on a content platform as a voice mimic. For $15 an hour, I converse with clients, using whatever voice they request. Of course, alongside the paying clients, my comment section always attracts a different crowd. They leave malicious remarks about my line of work. $15 just to hear a voice? Might as well start an OnlyFans. Hey streamer, if I pay extra, can I get a little more? I rolled my eyes and fired back. I'm genuinely curious about the environment you were raised in, considering you project that onto everyone you see. No amount of money can buy you manners. I suggest you fix that problem first. Sending that reply only invited more trolls to jump on the bandwagon. You're just making money by acting cute? Stop pretending to be so righteous. To keep genuine clients from getting the wrong idea, my usual routine is to snap back, delete the comment, and block the user. It lets me vent my frustration without having to worry about them retaliating. My mother, sitting nearby, set her phone down and leaned in to chime in with her unsolicited agreement. I told you ages ago, this isn't a respectable job. If the relatives see this, I won't even be able to show my face in public. All I want is to earn a living through my own skills, but people always twist my intentions. My bio clearly states that I am a voice mimic who can imitate various voices, act as a sounding board to vent to, or simply listen, and that all inappropriate requests will be denied. Since when did a girl having a nice voice automatically associate her with that kind of illicit stuff? It probably started a few years back, when someone introduced me to a gig dubbing for film and television. When my mom saw the expressive faces I made while recording, she called me a lunatic and accused me of being a show-off. She said I was neglecting real careers to mess around with weird hobbies. She followed me to the recording studio every single day to make a scene, until I was eventually asked to leave and obediently found a standard 9-to-5 job. I thought that would finally bring some peace. New Year's Day this year also happened to be my birthday. To avoid hearing her usual speech about how much she suffered giving birth to me, I volunteered to work overtime. But she marched right into my office and screamed at my boss, accusing him of exploiting me. Consequently, I was fired again. She believed she was standing up for me and even called me a coward for not fighting back. It wasn't until a neighbor pointed out how out of line she was that she faintly realized she might have been in the wrong. I told her I would look for a new job after the holidays and use my vocal talents to scrape together whatever money I could in the meantime. She had agreed to it perfectly fine, yet she still chose to pour cold water on me just as I was building my confidence, kicking me while I was down when strangers misunderstood my work. The look on her face seemed to scream, "See? I told you making money off your voice was sleazy." I sighed and went back to scrubbing the malicious comments from my page. Soon enough, a new request popped up. "Blair, can you imitate the voice of a dead person?" Seeing a potential client, I sat up straight and typed back quickly. "As long as you let me hear it once, I can mimic anyone." The person promptly sent a direct message containing a screen recording. "Hi Blair, I'm Jess. Can you imitate my mother's voice?" I tapped on the video Jess sent. It was a long scroll through a chat history. Her mother had sent her dozens of voice memos, one after another, piled up in a massive wall of audio. Every single one had an unread marker next to it. None of them had been played. Jess had never clicked on a single one, nor had she ever replied. Look at this heartless brat, ignoring all these messages from her own mother. My mom had leaned over again. I shot up from my chair and hid my phone behind my back. I had asked her countless times to respect my privacy. Her usual counter was always that she raised me. She had seen every inch of me. So what privacy could I possibly need from her? But I also knew that arguing back even slightly would just be added to her running tally of my offenses to be brought up later. I forced my voice to stay low and calm, telling her that I had just received a commission and needed her to leave the room so I could work. Muttering under her breath, she finally walked out. I shut the door and quickly opened the chat. Slipping into the cadence of Jess's mother, I sent her a voice note. Jess, I've listened to the first clip. How do you need me to work with you on this? She was highly satisfied with the voice and laid out her one requirement. I want you to reply to me in a way that doesn't kill the mood. I paused, taken aback. I had assumed that since her mother passed away, Jess was seeking me out to process her grief and have one last meaningful conversation. I didn't expect her only wish to be a mother who wouldn't ruin a good moment. Still, the golden rule of customer service is not to pry. After receiving her payment, Jess sent over an old photograph and asked me to set it as my profile picture. It showed a woman in a red coat sitting on the grass, holding a little girl with pigtails. With everything set up, I started the timer. Setting the scene as her childhood self, Jess sent the first message. Mom, I accidentally dropped an egg and broke it. I'm sorry. She followed it up with a blurry picture of a cracked egg splattered across the floor. I typed back an affectionate action, pretending to pat her on the head. Then I held down the record button. Jess, you're amazing. You dropped that egg, and it splattered perfectly into the shape of a little duck. How cute. A reply came through almost instantly. You're the best, Mom. I only got a 95 on this exam, though. I'll double-check my work better next time. I recorded my response. You got a 95? Back in my day, I was lucky just to pass. Come on. Mom's taking you to the mall to celebrate. Jess sent back a laughing sticker and continued. Mom, I'm the one who got the 95. What do you mean you're taking me to the mall? Aren't you supposed to ask what I want to eat? Oh, right. So, where does Jess want to go? I'll take you anywhere. She responded with a thoughtful sticker. Let's go out to eat then, and I want a fancy drink too. Sounds great. I want one too. We can toast. Jess fired off several overjoyed stickers before shifting the context to her college years. Mom, I picked up a part-time job at a coffee shop during the break. Taking customers' orders feels like playing house when I was little, but I actually get paid for it. I chuckled into the mic. I want to try a coffee made by my Jess. Then I'll bring you a cup I made myself when I get off work. The scene shifted again to her post-grad working life. Mom, I just wrapped up a big project at work and finally have some free time. Do you want to go on a trip with me? Let's do it. I'll go pack the bags, you book the tickets. We're leaving tonight. The pace at which Jess jumped through different eras of her life was accelerating. Just when I expected another scenario, she sent a sighing sticker instead. Thank you, Blair. But never mind, let's just stop here. She had booked me for an hour, and we were barely 20 minutes in when she called it quits. I offered a partial refund, but she declined. Judging by her tone, she sounded deeply hollowed out. Was she unhappy with my service? Feeling awkward, I asked her if she was disappointed with how I replied. No, it was perfect. Before I could press further, another message came through. You did a wonderful job. You sounded exactly like the mother I always fantasized about having, but it just felt too disconnected from reality. Because in real life, whenever I shared my joy with my mother, it would turn into misery. And if I vented my frustrations to her, I'd end up feeling 100 times worse. When I recorded that video for you and heard her voice playing back, I completely broke down. I felt this blinding surge of agitation. But she's gone now, and I still cry for her. I love my mom, but I hate her too. I just don't know what to do anymore. Her voice trembled, thick with unbearable pain. Softening my tone, I asked if there was anything else I could do to help. No need. Today is the anniversary of her death, and I've been running around all day. I'm exhausted and just want to sleep. I'll reach out if I need you again. I quickly apologized for intruding and let her rest. Whenever I completed a commission, I would turn the interaction into a promotional video, provided the client gave me permission. I did the same with this session. The moment the video went live, 3 new orders rolled in, all asking me to roleplay as their deceased loved ones. Some clients hadn't made it in time to say goodbye, while others only had a handful of surviving voicemails left on their phones. They came to me looking for closure. By the time I finished the last request, it was the dead of night. I had taken 8 commissions in a single day. Considering I only had 3 for the entirety of last month, my account was finally gaining real traction. Helping these people find a little peace felt like genuinely meaningful work. Just as I was about to go to sleep, my phone chimed. It was a voice note from Jess. Mom, do you know why I only ever listened to the very last message whenever you sent me those massive walls of voice memos? Ha ha ha. Her voice drifted through the speaker, slurred and heavy with alcohol. She was clearly drunk, and heavily at that. Do you want to know, Mom? Despite my exhaustion, I wanted to make up for the 40 minutes she hadn't used earlier. I cleared my throat and shifted back into character. I'd love to know. Will you tell me? The voice on the other end was raspy. Because I was terrified you were having an emergency, but I was equally terrified that it wasn't an emergency at all. So I'd skip right to the very end just to check. Mom, when I broke an egg, you hit me. But when you were cooking breakfast for me and you broke an egg, why did you scream at me then too? Why did you curse at me and call me a useless leech? I was only 6 years old. If you didn't want to make breakfast, you could have just taught me how to do it. I scored a 95 on my test. I was first in my class, and all I wanted was to buy a bag of chips. But you just jabbed your finger into my forehead and demanded to know why I didn't check my answers more carefully, why I was in such a rush to turn it in. But Mom, I did check. I checked so many times, and I don't know why I couldn't find the mistakes. In college, I took that job at the coffee shop to ease your financial burden. I wanted to share the excitement of earning my first paycheck with you. But you just told me that since I refused to focus on my studies, I'd end up pouring coffee for the rest of my life. My grades were perfect. I got into a great university. Why couldn't you just tell me I did a good job? Listening to Jess sob through the phone, my mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. My own mother was exactly the same, and because of that, I had no idea how to comfort her. She kept going. You always talked about how jealous you were of the neighbor's daughter because she took her mom on vacations. Even when I was drowning in stress from work, I still tried to take you on a trip during my holidays. But you refused. You told me you were used to suffering, unlike me, throwing money around and gallivanting all over the place. If friends invited me out of town for a weekend, you'd sarcastically tell me 2 days wasn't enough, that I should go for weeks and just lose my job while I was at it. You knew perfectly well that outside of business trips, I never traveled anywhere. So why did you insist on painting me as some reckless spendthrift? If I argued with you, you'd burst into tears and complain that I grew up just to be vicious to you. But if I stayed silent, you'd scream at me and ask if I'd suddenly gone mute. Jess was screaming herself hoarse on the other end of the line, relentlessly hurling questions at a phantom version of her mother. When Dad got sick, I was right in the middle of studying for grad school. You'd flood my phone with dozens of voice memos a day, sobbing about how he was dying, how much pain he was in. I'd drop everything and rush to the hospital, and then you'd berate me for abandoning my studies to come stick my nose where it didn't belong. But the minute I actually sat down to study, you'd call me a heartless monster for not visiting my dying father. It was like you completely forgot I was preparing for my exams until the exact second I walked through the hospital doors. Eventually, I listened to you. I put my head down and focused on the test. And that was when I started only listening to the first few seconds of your messages. Just long enough to make sure no one was dead, and then I'd ignore the rest. But then, on the day of my exam, you stormed right up to the testing center and screamed at me in front of everyone. You publicly humiliated me for ignoring your texts and missing Dad's final moments. That was how I found out he died. I bombed the exam, and I never had the heart to try again. Why, Mom? Why did you always bury the important information in the dead center of your voice memos? If you could say it in one sentence, why did you drag it out into a novel? I wanted to say goodbye to Dad too. And from that day on, any time a relative praised me for anything, you'd instantly chime in and say it didn't matter because I was too stupid to get into grad school. Jess broke down into agonizing, guttural sobs. I stayed silent for a long time, waiting until the heavy crying began to subside. Adopting her mother's voice, I answered softly, begging her not to cry, telling her that her mother was wrong and that it was all in the past now. But the words didn't seem to register. She just kept speaking to the void. I'm so tired. I don't want to keep doing this anymore. My stomach dropped. I bolted upright in bed. Jess, listen to me, I urged. You got into a wonderful university. You worked hard and made your own money. You've done an incredible job. Jess shrieked back at me. Shut up. I don't want to hear it. Even now, I'm terrified to make friends. I'm terrified to date. Because you always loved humiliating me in front of them. And when my friends pushed me away, when my boyfriends dumped me, you just mock me for being worthless and say it was no wonder nobody wanted me. If I die, will your voice finally stop echoing in my head? Will the nightmares finally stop? Yes, they have to. That's the only way out. She was spiraling into total hysteria. While frantically whispering reassurances, I tapped into her profile. She was in the same city as me, and the location tag on her previous videos was only a 20-minute drive away. Trying not to alert her, I kept the line open and covertly texted emergency services. The dispatcher replied that they were tracing her exact coordinates and instructed me to keep her talking. But growing up in the exact same kind of household, I was at a total loss for what to say to pull her back from the ledge. I strained to catch every syllable she spoke, noticing her voice breaking up into static. The cellular signal was faltering. I cranked the volume to the max and pressed the phone against my ear. Beneath her ragged breathing, I could hear the distinct sound of water lapping against a shoreline, accompanied by the rising howl of heavy winds. She was at the river. I texted the detail to the police, snatched my coat from the chair, and dashed for the front door. But the commotion woke my mother up. She physically blocked the exit, demanding to know where I was going at this hour. I quickly slammed the mute button on the call and practically yelled in panic that I had to save a girl who was trying to jump into the river. My mother shoved me backward into the hallway, raising her voice to a grating pitch, telling me I wasn't going anywhere and warning me that her family might try to extort me for money if she died. I stomped my foot in pure desperation, telling her I had already called the police and nobody was going to extort me. She fired back that if I had already called the cops, there was no reason for me to go, ordering me back to my room. For a split second, I hesitated. She was right. If the police were en route, what could I actually accomplish? But an overwhelming urge pushed me forward. I needed to see Jess. I needed to wrap my arms around her. Deep down, I felt like Jess was just a mirror reflecting my own life. She was just following through on the dark impulses I had harbored for years, but never possessed the courage to act upon. I was in my 20s, but I had zero friends and zero romantic prospects. My entire existence was governed by a strict curfew, home by 9 o'clock, with absolutely no exceptions for late-night outings. My mother glared at me with venomous authority. I violently tore my arm from her grip and threw open the door. As I sprinted away, she shrieked after me that if I acted like such a tramp, no man would ever want me. I clamped my hands over my ears and kept running. It wasn't until I cleared the apartment complex gates that I lifted the phone back to my ear. Thank God, the call was still connected. Jess was still mumbling disjointedly, completely oblivious to the chaos on my end. I disabled the mute, swallowed hard to steady my breathing, and spoke again in her mother's voice. Jess, I was wrong to misunderstand you and drag you down all those years. It was entirely my fault. But you grew into such an incredible woman. You got into a great school, you worked so hard to make my life easier, and you even tried to treat me to a vacation. You made me so proud. Jess, will you make me a cup of coffee tomorrow? I really want to taste it. Jess let out a hollow, exhausted sound. Mom, drop the act. This isn't you. You would never speak to me like this. Before you died, you transferred $80,000 into my bank account and told me you wouldn't be around to walk me down the aisle. You said you scraped together every penny over a lifetime of suffering just to give me that money. You said that was why you hid your illness, because you were terrified of draining the savings and terrified I'd empty my own pockets trying to cure you. You told me the money was for my future. You told me to find a good husband and live a good life. You told me I needed to stop being so lazy and learn to sweet-talk people, or else nobody would ever love me. The day you passed away, I held you in my arms and begged you to stop talking. When I finally took every dime I'd saved since graduation and begged the doctors to save you, they just looked at me and said it was too late to start caring about my mother. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know you loved me in your own twisted way, but carrying all these words around inside me is just suffocating. Today is the anniversary of your passing. I miss you so much. I miss the version of you that hugged me in kindergarten. Back then, you used to praise me. You rarely poisoned my ears with gossip about the neighbors or our relatives. But when I finally mustered the courage to listen to those last voice memos you sent me, it destroyed me all over again. Hearing your voice dragged all those memories back to the surface. Your version of caring for me was indistinguishable from a curse. You tell me to rest and take care of my body, warning me that staring at a screen all day would ruin my eyes. But the second I actually took a day off to sleep in, you'd storm into my room at the crack of dawn and scream at me for acting like a rotting corpse. Jess was hyperventilating through her tears. Listening to her vividly recount her trauma, a suffocating dread wrapped itself tightly around my own chest. No wonder she hired me just to speak to her kindly, without ruining the mood. She missed her mother desperately, and she missed the sound of her voice. But confronting the actual recordings she left behind was too agonizing to bear. Her mother had sacrificed everything to leave her with a nest egg, but in the process, she had spent years carving her daughter to pieces with invisible knives. Perhaps this was a paradox with no solution. Mercifully, the midnight streets were empty. I arrived at the riverbank in record time and began desperately scanning the area. I'm sorry, Blair. I've had way too much to drink. I shouldn't have bothered you. Jess sounded like she had regained a sliver of lucidity. I exhaled a shaky breath of relief, telling her it was completely fine and that she could always call me when she felt down without paying a dime. Thank you, Blair. But I think there's something seriously wrong with me. I constantly hear her voice in my head. I haven't slept properly in so long. The only time the voices stop is when I'm talking to my fantasy version of her. When I'm talking to you. Ever since I started living alone, I spend every single holiday in total isolation. Because on the rare occasions I do see my relatives, they always remind me that if it weren't for me, my mother would have been able to afford her medical treatments. I'm just so exhausted. I'm so young, but I feel like I'm completely alone in the universe. Thank you for listening to me ramble at the very end of my life. The call abruptly disconnected. I froze in my tracks. Just a short distance ahead, a tiny flicker of light in the darkness suddenly winked out. It looked exactly like the glow of a fading phone screen. I bolted in that direction. Jess, wait! I screamed. The screen illuminated once more, illuminating its own brief descent before hitting the ground. I was a second too late. All I found was the discarded phone lying in the dirt. I quickly flipped on my flashlight and swept the beam across the water. There, wading deeper into the black river, was a girl around my own age. She raised her arms and pushed against the current, as if she were desperately reaching for an anchor, or perhaps finally shoving away the invisible chains that had choked the life out of her youth. Without hesitating, I charged into the water. The freezing temperature sliced through my clothes like razors. All I could hear was the frantic splashing of my own struggle against the suffocating, pitch-black abyss. As the water began creeping up toward her chin, I screamed her name again. At that exact moment, police cruisers swarmed the embankment, their high beams cutting through the gloom and spotlighting us. Jess stopped wading and turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were bloodshot, the droplets clinging to her lashes indistinguishable from river water or tears. Jess, it's Blair. Please don't go any further. Just wait for me, okay? She tilted her head, her lips purple from the cold and quivering violently. She looked as though she were trying to verify if I was just another hallucination. Is someone actually calling my name? How is that even possible? Yes. It's real. Don't move. Wait for me. Miraculously, she stayed rooted to the spot. I waded toward her, fighting the current with agonizingly slow steps. The instant my fingers locked around her wrist, her legs gave out entirely, and she collapsed heavily against my chest. The sudden shift in weight knocked me off balance, dragging us both under the surface. Thankfully, the officers had already plunged into the river and swiftly hauled us both onto the muddy bank. While we waited shivering on the shore for the ambulance, I furiously rubbed her arms to generate some heat. A crowd of late-night pedestrians had gravitated toward the flashing lights, forming a tight circle around us. They unabashedly whipped out their phones to record us, gossiping loudly. What a shame, throwing her life away so young. Imagine how heartbroken her parents would be. I heard it's depression. Pretty severe, too. They just have too much free time. Back in our day, we were just happy to have food on the table. Nobody had the luxury of entertaining nonsense like this. Kids these days are so spoiled they don't even realize how good they have it. I clamped my hands firmly over Jess's ears to block them out. Glaring venomously at the gawkers, I roared at them to put their phones down and stop filming. They simply rolled their eyes and smirked defensively. One bystander even had the audacity to start a live stream. Jess regained a bit of lucidity. Pulling a weak, trembling smile, she looked up at me with tears pooling in her eyes. Are the people who know me going to see this? I placed a hand over her face to shield her from the lenses, and held her tight against me. No, they won't. I'm covering you up. You're safe. Her body was racked with violent shivers. The mob actually stepped closer, turning on their camera flashes, and didn't disperse until the police aggressively shouted them down. At long last, the paramedics arrived. They loaded us both into the back of the ambulance. Fortunately, outside of mild hypothermia, we were physically unharmed. Mentally, however, Jess was entirely detached, lying rigid in the hospital bed with dead, vacant eyes. I sat vigil by her bedside. After a long silence, she finally spoke. Don't bother saving me next time. Even if I survive, I don't have any family left. I don't have any friends. I just want it to be over. I grabbed her hand and looked her dead in the eye. Next time? Next time, invite me to go with you. My own gaze dropped to the floor. She flinched in surprise and stared at me. Invite you to go with me? I nodded. Our lives are exactly the same. We were raised by the exact same kind of mother. But you actually had the guts to go through with it. She let out a faint, cynical laugh. If you really lived my life, there's no way you could have responded with such overwhelming tenderness the first time I hired you. You must have been raised by a wonderfully gentle mother to be able to accurately emulate the love I always dreamed of. I smiled, shaking my head with a bitter sort of irony. Or maybe, the mothers we fantasized about having were just completely identical, and that's why I knew exactly what you needed to hear. She studied my face intently, searching for a lie. Then, the tension melted from her features, replaced by a soft smile of relief. I believe you. I gripped her hand firmly, my tone solemn. If you're willing, we can be each other's only friends. From now on, when something good happens, we share it. When something terrible happens, we face it together. A faint glimmer of hope flared in her dull eyes. We really can. I nodded with absolute conviction. We absolutely can. Right as Jess was beginning to let her walls down, the hospital door was violently shoved open. My mother stormed into the room. She marched right up to me, yanked me by the ear, and started screaming at me for pulling all-nighters out on the streets and fraternizing with trash. She revealed that she had stumbled across the viral video of us at the riverbank while scrolling on her phone. Jabbling a finger accusingly at Jess, she sneered that her parents busted their backs to raise her, and the second life got a little hard. She tried to kill herself, calling her an absolute waste of a child. Jess's fists clenched until her knuckles turned white, her chest heaving as she struggled to breathe. I desperately tried to physically shove my mother out the door, but she grabbed me by the collar and tried to drag me toward the exit. We are leaving. If I catch you hanging around these kinds of degenerates again, I'll make you regret it. The agonizing sound of her shrieking echoed in my ears as I watched Jess having a full-blown panic attack on the hospital bed. I absolutely refused to lose the one genuine connection I had just fought so hard to make. I forcefully threw her hand off my clothes. I'm not going back. What exactly is wrong with Jess? She excelled in school. She has a great career. She's just sick. My mother pursed her lips defensively and fired back. If she was really so successful, why would she be hanging around an unemployed failure like you? I'm unemployed? If you hadn't barged into my office and thrown a temper tantrum, would I have lost my job in the first place? It was New Year's Day. Making my daughter work on a holiday was a direct slap in the face to me. Instantly, the desire to argue evaporated from my body. She lacked any concept of social boundaries. She genuinely believed that if she threw a big enough fit, everyone would cower before her. But the reality was that I was the only person on earth who was ever afraid of her. Whenever she caused a scene in public and realized strangers weren't actually intimidated, she would feel profoundly embarrassed. To save face, she would shift the blame onto me, cursing my incompetence for forcing her to endure such humiliation at her age. And because of that, my inability to fight back had been permanently hardwired into me since childhood. The abuse Jess had endured was a carbon copy of my own. Looking at the sheer hostility radiating from the woman who gave birth to me, I simply turned my back, walked out into the hallway, and flagged down the hospital security guards. As they escorted her away, her curses faded down the corridor, and the world finally fell quiet. "Blair, why don't you just run away?" Jess's quiet question grounded me back in the room. "Do you really think it's possible to escape, Jess?" She offered a self-deprecating smile in response. We sat there in heavy silence, both paralyzed by a puzzle neither of us knew how to solve. Needing a distraction, I pulled out my phone. My promotional video was once again swarming with vicious comments. I tapped on their profiles. Weren't these the exact same trolls I had manually blocked hours ago? I double-checked the system. I had definitively blacklisted them. So how were they continuing to bypass the filter? I navigated to the account security page and checked the active login sessions. Besides my own phone, there was a secondary device actively logged in. It was my mother's cell phone. She had gone into my settings and unblocked every single one of my harassers. She weaponized a mob of internet strangers to validate her own toxic worldview, desperate to manipulate me into believing that my voice acting career was sleazy and degrading. Completely drained of energy, I slumped against the backrest of my chair, taking deep, ragged breaths to stop myself from snapping. Once I pulled myself back together, I looked up at Jess. She was staring at me with profound sympathy. Because our upbringings were practically identical, we didn't need to exchange a single word to accurately read the trauma painted across each other's faces. "Jess, I'm going to move out," I whispered. A spark of light returned to her eyes. "Aren't you afraid they'll call you an ungrateful daughter? Aren't you afraid your mom will break down crying and use her love as a leash to drag you back?" I shook my head slowly. "Not anymore." Jess hesitated, testing the waters. "Then, can I come with you?" "Yes." Seeing that she had shelved her suicidal intentions, and knowing I wouldn't have to face the future alone, a genuine sliver of happiness managed to pierce through the gloom. 3 days later, Jess was discharged from the hospital. During that time, I went to the bank to request a new debit card under my own name. Ever since I joined the workforce, my paychecks had been deposited straight into an account entirely controlled by my mother. Looking back, it was utterly pathetic that I needed her permission just to buy myself a shirt. She had commandeered my finances for the sole purpose of fishing for compliments from relatives, eager to hear them say how dutiful I was and how thankful they were their own kids didn't bleed them dry. Once my financial independence was secure, Jess proposed we split the rent on an apartment down the middle. We found a cozy 2-bedroom unit and decorated every inch of it exactly how we wanted. I quickly noticed that Jess was a chronic night owl, so I suggested taking her to see a doctor after the holidays. She playfully brushed me off, joking that since she was born at exactly 4 in the morning, her biological clock was permanently hardwired to the night shift. On New Year's Eve, we stringed up decorations together and cooked a massive feast of our favorite foods. We packed the fridge with soda and beer, and stuffed the freezer to the brim with ice cream and junk food. For the first time in my life, my holiday dinner didn't involve being publicly dissected and humiliated by my mother at the dining table, nor was I forced to listen to her compare me to other people's successful daughters. Likewise, Jess didn't have to hide from her extended family or spend the holiday rotting away in total isolation. Stepping into the new year, I was absolutely convinced that we were finally going to be okay. After dinner, we put on the New Year's countdown broadcast. I amused myself by imitating the overly formal cadence of the television host. Jess took it a step further by muting the TV entirely and forcing me to dub the live footage by reading his lips, laughing until she couldn't breathe. When the clock struck midnight, the sky outside erupted into fireworks, and we sat out on the balcony passing a bottle back and forth. Thoroughly buzzed, Jess slumped against my shoulder and mumbled, "Blair, do you have a dream?" I smiled. "Of course I do. I want to be a professional dubbing artist for animation and movies." She sat up straight and stared at me, the fireworks reflecting vividly in her dark eyes. "You can definitely do it, Blair. Your ability to mimic voices is unreal." You're going to be famous one day. I threw my head back and laughed. Deal. And when I hit it big, I'll pay all your bills for the rest of your life. She covered her mouth, giggling. Then I'll hold you to it. I turned the question back on her. What about you, Jess? What's your dream? The spark in her eyes dimmed almost instantly. I have one, but it's not even worth mentioning. She lifted her bottle and took a long swig. I nudged her shoulder playfully. Don't be greedy. Tell me what it is. She chewed her lip before offering a shy smile. It's simple, really. I just want a place in the top 3 at a Latin dance competition. My jaw dropped. You know how to dance? You have to teach me right now. Jess looked completely blindsided. You don't think taking dance lessons is a massive waste of time? Or aren't you afraid of the nasty rumors people spread about dancers? I furrowed my brow in genuine confusion. Are you kidding? I have 2 left feet. I've always been insanely jealous of anyone who can actually move. Teach me, please. A glowing, knowing smile spread across her face. She set the bottle down. She disappeared into her bedroom and emerged minutes later, wearing a glittering fringed dress and professional dance heels, her hair slicked back into an elegant bun. Her entire aura had transformed. You're beautiful, I blurted out. She patiently walked me through the basics. Latin dance is divided into 5 distinct categories: rumba, cha-cha, jive, samba, and paso doble. When she spoke about her art, her eyes blazed with a fiery passion. It was the first time I had ever seen her look genuinely confident. That night out on the balcony, she performed all 5 styles for me. The sprawling midnight sky served as her grand stage. Explosions of color bloomed and faded in the backdrop behind her. In that exact moment, she looked like an eternal, unyielding moon commanding the night sky. Perhaps it was the alcohol, but my head grew impossibly heavy, and I eventually drifted off into a hazy sleep. My final memory before blacking out was us making a pact to tune out the toxic voices in our heads and chase our dreams in the new year. When I woke up, I was tucked warmly into my own bed. The outfit I planned to wear today was neatly folded at the foot of the mattress. I had casually mentioned once that getting dressed on a freezing winter morning was agonizing. From that day forward, she routinely laid my clothes out for me so I could pull them on without ever leaving the warmth of the blankets. I told her she didn't need to perform these acts of service to earn my friendship. She insisted she wasn't trying to earn anything. She just genuinely wanted to cherish the only real friend she had. I slipped into my clothes and stepped out to make her breakfast. But the living room, which had been a disaster zone of party snacks the night before, was utterly spotless. It was barely 6 in the morning. Was she already awake? I walked over to her bedroom and pushed the door open, but it was empty. The duvet was perfectly squared and made. Frowning, I pulled out my phone to call her. That was when I noticed her own cell phone resting on her nightstand. I figured she must have run to the corner store for groceries. I retreated to my room and unlocked my screen to check the notifications on my profile. Instead, I was greeted by a text from Jess, sent at 3 in the morning. Blair, thank you for letting me live just a little bit longer. I was truly happy. And thank you for allowing me to know what it feels like to have a friend at the very end of my life. Even though you're a bit clumsy and never really knew the right words to comfort me, just knowing you were willing to listen was enough. When you said you were going to move out and I asked to come with you, I mostly just wanted to see if you could actually escape the trap. Outsiders might look at us and call us selfish, but I genuinely wanted to watch you win. It's a shame, really. I couldn't overcome my own demons, so I have to bow out early. The physical symptoms of the trauma are just too agonizing. When we made that promise to chase our dreams in the new year, I honestly believed for a fleeting second that I was going to be reborn. By the way, today is my birthday. Thank you for spending it with me. At least most people left the city for the holidays. Even if I jump, it won't traumatize too many bystanders, right? I'm running out of time. I have to go now. It's almost 4 o'clock. Exactly 22 years ago, at this precise minute, I was brought into this world. Blair, please promise me you'll fight tooth and nail for your dream. If heaven is real, I hope I get to sit up there and watch your movies one day. But I've been told that people who take their own lives go straight to hell, so I guess I shouldn't hold my breath. Goodbye, Blair. I wish you the best. Your friend, Jessica. By the time I finished reading, my hands were violently shaking. Just as panic set in, and I tried to figure out where to start looking, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. Her voice burst through the receiver, shrill and frantic, saying she was so thankful I was okay. I was totally lost and asked what she meant. She screamed that Jess had thrown herself off a building, and that she was terrified I was dead too. She rambled about how they taped off the scene on the live broadcast, so the cameras couldn't get a clear shot of the body. She spiraled into panic about how someone died at my new apartment, and what if the landlord came after me to pay for the damages. She yelled that she had told me not to disobey her, that I insisted on moving out without giving her the address, and that she had warned me from the very beginning not to associate with people like Jess. A deafening static filled my skull. I couldn't process a single word she was saying anymore. It just sounded like a screeching electrical current being pumped directly into my brain. What on earth could have instantly shattered her will to live? Just a few hours before she sent that message, she was completely fine. She intentionally went far away, so she wouldn't drag me into the mess of her death. My mother continued her endless, narcissistic rant through the speaker. My vocal cords nearly snapped as I shrieked into the mic, demanding to know where she jumped. She scoffed that I lived with her and didn't even know, before saying it happened at Maplewood. Maplewood. That was her childhood home. The home she spent money on rent just to avoid returning to. I hung up before my mother could finish her sentence and practically flew out the door. By the time I arrived at the scene, they had already draped a white sheet over her body. Just as I moved to climb into the back of the ambulance, my mother materialized out of the crowd. She grabbed my arm and violently yanked me backward, screaming that I was out of my mind and that if I went to the morgue with her, they were going to make me foot the bill. I shot her a look of pure, concentrated hatred and forcefully shoved her away, telling her to back off. Tears exploded down her face as she pointed an accusatory finger at me and wailed that I was a heartless wretch for putting my hands on her over a total stranger. She shrieked that if I showed even half this much devastation when she died, she would consider herself lucky. I screamed back at the top of my lungs, "Oh, don't you worry. I'll be in the grave long before you are. You've spent my entire life violently offloading your bitterness and toxic waste onto my shoulders. You feel fantastic, while I'm left to choke on the poison. How could you possibly die? And if you ever actually do, I promise I'll throw you the most extravagant funeral money can buy." Without looking back, I climbed into the rig. As the heavy metal doors swung shut, her parting shriek bled through the gap, crying that I was actively praying for her death. I clamped my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes tightly shut. After navigating the bureaucratic nightmare of the paperwork, I was officially cleared to handle her affairs. I commissioned a headstone for her plot. The engraving read, "Jessica, born January 1st, 1998, 4 a.m. Died January 1st, 2020, 4 a.m. The stonemason requested a solo portrait of her for the plaque, but the only pictures I had in my camera roll were selfies we took together. Leaving the mortuary, I returned to our apartment to dig through her phone in search of a decent photo. Pushing the door open, the apartment still radiated that same festive warmth. The holiday drinks and beers we bought were still sitting half-finished in the fridge. I walked into her bedroom and picked up her phone from the nightstand. Just as I was about to open the photo gallery, my eyes darted to her social media app. There was a massive red notification badge hovering over the icon, indicating an avalanche of unread activity. I knew for a fact that she had never posted anything on that platform before. I tapped into her profile. The very first comments that loaded were people demanding to know where the cowards who were attacking her went, asking why they had suddenly deleted their accounts. Others wrote how incredibly sorry they were to have to discover her this way. I clicked on her one and only upload. The timestamp showed it was posted at exactly 1 in the morning. She had done her makeup beautifully, sitting gracefully in front of the lens and giving a cheerful wave. "Hi everyone. I used to suffer from severe clinical depression, and I've tried to end my own life multiple times. That all changed when a girl named Blair saved me. We share almost identical childhoods and traumas. She made me realize that my voice actually matters, and that people are willing to listen. My mother passed away, but her voice still haunts me like an inescapable nightmare. But Blair finally made the decision to escape her toxic household, and I wanted to stand by her side and accomplish the things I could never do alone. We made a promise to chase our dreams together, I really hope any other girls out there struggling with the same illness can find a new path forward too. Let's keep fighting. At the end of the video, she detailed her history of abuse, hoping her transparency would inspire others suffering in silence to pick themselves back up. What an absolute idiot. She was still crawling on broken glass herself, yet she was already trying to drag strangers out of the darkness. The vast majority of the current comments were outpourings of grief and sympathy. There were, predictably, a few complaints from the residents of her old complex, grumbling about why she couldn't have picked a different building instead of traumatizing the neighborhood she grew up in. But then I saw a thread where the Night Owl users who originally supported her had uploaded screenshots of the vile comments that had bombarded her upload mere hours ago. And that was how I finally discovered what shattered her will to live. The screenshots were brutal. They said if her mother had raised a dog instead of her, at least it would wag its tail at her, and that her mother really would have been better off raising a dog. They told her that she constantly used depression as an excuse, and if she really was depressed, she should just go die already because she was just begging for attention online. They preached that in her mother's generation, nobody had the luxury of being fragile, that her mother fought to survive and kept her fed, so she should be on her knees thanking her. They claimed there was absolutely no way a mother would act like that, and that she was just a massive failure. So obviously nobody wanted to deal with her. They berated her, asking how she expected her mother to feed her, clothe her, and baby her feelings, questioning where in the world she thought life was that easy since she grew up physically unharmed regardless of how she was treated. Below every single one of those atrocities, I saw Jess desperately trying to defend herself. I was always good to my mom. I make a great salary, and I gave her plenty of money to repay her. But no matter what I did, I was completely worthless in her eyes. She used the most venomous words imaginable to rip apart my every flaw. Unsurprisingly, nobody cared to listen to the truth. Her final recorded reply was time-stamped at 2:30 in the morning. I thought everyone out there would understand me the way Blair did, but I forgot that the rest of you were lucky enough to be loved. I'm sorry. And scanning through the usernames of the people who took it upon themselves to educate her, I noticed heavy overlap with the locals whining about property values plummeting. They were the elderly neighbors who had watched her grow up. They were the exact same neighbors who used to huddle in the stairwell, nodding along in agreement while her mother mercilessly slandered her. When she died, I didn't shed a tear. When I collected her urn, I didn't cry. When I picked out her gravestone, my eyes stayed dry. But reading those comments, I broke down. I wept so violently that my entire body convulsed, my tears blurring the screen until I could no longer read the text. She didn't have to die. She honestly believed she was finally healing, and she just wanted to pass that light on to others. What an idiot. What a colossal, selfless idiot. Forcing my trembling hands to steady, I screenshotted every single comment, logged the usernames, and handed the dossier over to a lawyer to file a lawsuit. Regrettably, the legal crusade culminated in nothing more than a few hollow public apologies and meager fines. The attorney explained that because she had a documented history of severe depression, proving direct causality was nearly impossible. The internet mob was simply the match that ignited a pre-existing powder keg. The cowards who deactivated their profiles would undoubtedly create new ones in a few months. They would pick up their righteous gavels of filial piety all over again, eagerly bashing the skull of the next ungrateful child who dared to speak out against parental abuse. As soon as she was buried, I packed my bags and left the city forever. I reached out to the studio director who originally offered me the dubbing gig years ago, practically begging for a second chance. After swearing up and down that there would be no more familial disruptions, he finally gave me a shot. I poured everything I had into the microphone, and my stellar performances quickly snowballed into a steady stream of contracts for animated series and live-action films. Once my mother realized I was completely serious about cutting contact, she began texting me daily, flooding my phone with desperate apologies. I knew her remorse was genuine in the moment, but I also knew the second I set foot back in her house, her brain would instantly reset, convinced she had never done anything wrong. During my initial exile, she actually filed missing persons reports and plastered my face all over social media, begging the public for my whereabouts. Luckily, I had meticulously hidden my location and kept my career strictly under wraps. Eventually, she gave up the manhunt, settling for the unspoken agreement that I would just wire her a monthly living allowance. In my wildest dreams, I wanted to be like the protagonist of a movie, completely severing all ties and walking away into the sunset without a shred of baggage. But the legal and social realities of the world simply didn't allow for such clean breaks. 5 years later, I was a widely recognized and highly respected voice actor. Major clients specifically requested me by name. Once again, it was New Year's Day, and I finally returned to the city. I had officially purchased the apartment I once rented with Jess, using it as a quiet sanctuary whenever I came back to visit her grave. I bought a bouquet of white roses, her absolute favorite. Staring deeply at the etched portrait on her headstone, my vision blurred until I swore I could see a phantom silhouette standing over the marble. It felt like she was flashing me a thumbs up, smiling warmly, telling me I did amazing and that I finally made it out. But it also felt like she was whispering a tragic realization of how easy it actually was to escape after all. A gentle spring rain began to fall, pattering softly against the dirt. It rained on New Year's Day. A thick layer of fog clouded my vision. After spending an hour catching her up on all the ridiculous things that had happened over the last 5 years, I wiped the dampness from the corners of my eyes and turned to leave. Blair, you came back. I spun around to find my mother standing there. She was holding her own bouquet, which she carefully laid at the base of the monument. After you disappeared, I started coming here to wait for you. I figured that even if you refused to come back for me, you'd eventually come back for her. Her tone was completely serene. I took a long, hard look at the woman standing in front of me. Silver threaded heavily through her hair, and the deeply ingrained hostility had vanished entirely from her eyes. After half a decade apart, a primal instinct flared in my chest, screaming at me to reach out and pull her into a hug. That is the terrifying power of family. Even when you are fully awake, fully aware of the trap, the biological gravity still pulls at you. But my arms remained firmly planted at my sides. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that the only reason we were capable of having this civil conversation was because of the massive, unbridgeable distance I had placed between us. I looked into what actually happened to her, Blair. And I understand now that treating you the way I did was wrong. I never should have spoken to her like that in the hospital. I know I made a mistake. Please, just come home with me. I gestured to the gravestone with a tilt of my chin and offered a bleak smile. Mom, did you ever figure out who pushed her off that building? She looked completely bewildered. Didn't the police rule it a suicide? I tilted my head back, staring straight up into the piercing sunlight that had broken through the rain clouds, my voice barely above a whisper. I saw the murderers. There was an entire army of them, and they all get to stand proudly in the warm sunlight, looking down with utter disgust at the dying ants writhing in the dirt. If I step foot inside your house, I am overwhelmed by an inexplicable, violent anxiety. Whenever I hear your voice, I feel the exact same way. I finally found a reason to live, and I am absolutely terrified of catching her sickness. I don't want to end up like her. I will fulfill every legal and financial obligation a daughter owes her mother, but please, stop asking me for more than I can survive giving. I took her to a nearby restaurant for lunch, paid the bill, and quickly excused myself. This time, she didn't throw a public tantrum to force me to stay, nor did she hurl insults about my lack of a conscience. Perhaps she truly had undergone a profound metamorphosis, or perhaps it was just a temporary truce. Only time would reveal the truth. I dragged my suitcase up the stairs and let myself into our old apartment. For the longest time after her death, I couldn't stomach looking at pictures of her, nor could I bring myself to log back into that voice acting profile. The account had exploded in popularity following her tragic passing. But sitting there, half a decade later, I finally pulled up the app and logged back in. The comment section was exactly as I had abandoned it 5 years ago. The single highest rated comment, pinned to the top of the feed, stated that no profession is inherently dirty and saving a life isn't about money. It expressed hope that everyone could learn from me, that when encountering someone in need, we should offer them companionship, show them we care, simply listen, and let the kindness pass forward. The timestamp read January 1st, 2020. I tapped the reply icon and began to type. The greatest kindness in this world isn't measured by grand, sweeping sacrifices. It's simply choosing not to recklessly pass judgment on strangers. If everyone could just manage that, there would be far fewer people plunging into the abyss. I hit send. The timestamp updated to January 5th, 2025.